Hello and happy Sunday. I'm going to do a quick review for those of you that need it on the multi-step equations. I'm going to start out with a basic equation first, and then I'll do one with some fractions, and then I'll also do another one with distribution just to kind of freshen up for the test that we have tomorrow. So I'm going to start out with an equation. Let's say 2x plus 5 equals 15. Okay, remember when we solve an equation, our whole goal is to get x by itself. So when I solve a multi-step equation, we have to reverse the order of operations. So typically, if I were to have something to plug in for x so I could evaluate the equation, I would start out with multiplication and division, then I would do the addition or subtraction. Well, because I'm reversing the order, I'm going to have to start out by undoing the addition and subtraction first, then undoing the multiplication or division. So here, if I want to get x by itself, I have to undo my addition by subtracting 5 from both sides. When I do that, that leaves me with 2x equals 10. Then I'm going to say to myself, how is x attached to this 2? And I say it's multiplication. So I know that I can undo multiplication with division, which then means I'm going to have to go in and divide both sides by 2, because that 2 is being multiplied by that x. So my 2's are going to cancel, leaving me with x, and then 10 divided by 2 is 5. Now I have solved this equation for x, because notice I have x by itself on this side, and I have my constant terms by themselves on this side. So if I took this 5 and I plugged it back into this equation up here, 2 times 5 is 10 plus 5 gives me 15. Now let's go ahead and try something similar except with fractions. So if I start out with an equation that says 3x plus 1/2 equals 5/2, let's say. Okay, just like in the example that we did before, I need to end up getting my variable by itself, which in this case is x. Okay, and I can see that my 3x is attached or has an addition piece attached to it, and that equals 5/2. So I have to undo the addition and subtraction first. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to subtract my 1/2 from both sides. So now I end up with 3x, these are going to cancel, equals 5/2 minus 1/2. Now with the fractions, when we do fractions, remember that you have to have the same denominators in order to add or subtract. So in this case, because both of them have a denominator of 2, I can leave it, which is really nice. And I can go ahead and simplify. So this is going to give me 3x equals 5 minus 1 is going to give me 4, and my denominator stays the same. So I end up with 3x equals 4 over 2, or I can rewrite that and say that 3x really equals 2. Now x still isn't by itself, so I'm not done yet. I have to undo that 3 that's attached to the x. 3 is attached to the x with multiplication, so I undo multiplication with division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3, and then I'm left with an x equals a positive 2/3 as my final answer. And again, you can plug that 2/3 in up here into your original equation, and 2/3 times 3 plus 1/2 should give you 5/2, and it does in this case. Now let's look at another example with a fraction. Here I have 3/4 x minus 2 equals 1/5. Okay, just as we did before, we're going to start out by undoing addition and subtraction. So in this case, I'm going to undo subtraction with addition. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So this is going to give me 3/4 x. The 2's are going to cancel, equals 1/5 plus 2. Well, in this case, I do not have the same denominator, so I'm going to have to get the common denominator. And in this case, I'm going to make my denominator 5. Since I have a 5 here and a 1 here, it's going to be easy to make that 1 turn into a 5 by multiplying everything by 5. So if I multiply the 2 by 5 and the denominator of 1 by 5, I really end up with 3/4 x equals 1/5 plus 10/5. And so now I can simplify that and say that 3/4 x is equal to 11/5. Okay, so that helps simplify the right side, but now I have to get x by itself still. So in order to do that, what I have to do is I have to undo this 3/4 right here. In order to undo that 3/4 x, you're either going to divide by 3/4, or I can say if I multiply that by 4 divided by 3, which is really what you're doing when you're dividing a fraction, I can see that my 4's are going to cancel and my 3's are going to cancel. But if I multiply the left side by 4/3, I also have to multiply the right side by 4/3. Now when I multiply fractions, remember that we multiply straight across. So I've got 11 times 4 in the numerator and 5 times 3 in the denominator. So when I simplify that, I have 11 times 4, which is 44. And in the denominator, I have 5 times 3, which is 15. And now I can simplify because 15 goes into 44 2 times. And I'm going to have 14 left over, which will give me 2 and 14/15. Now we'll go ahead and do one more example that involves distribution. So if I look at something like 2x minus 3 times the quantity of x minus 1 equals 5, the very first thing that I notice is that we have to distribute this -3 in order to simplify everything over here on the left-hand side. So I'm going to take and distribute that 3, or that -3 rather, and that gives me 2x minus 3x. So I take -3 and multiply by x. Then I have a -3, and I'm going to multiply that by a -1, which will actually give me a +3. So I'm going to go ahead and make that a +3, and then I have equals 5. So now I'm left with 2x minus 3x plus 3 equals 5. Well, in order to simplify, I'm going to combine my like terms. So 2x minus 3x will give me a -x plus 3 equals 5. I have to undo addition or subtraction first, which means I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides because I want to undo that addition. So I'm left with a -x. You have to remember to take that negative with you. My positive and -3 are going to cancel. So that's going to leave me with 5 minus 3, or 5 plus a -3, which gives me 2. Now, the last step that we have here is I have -x equals 2. X is not by itself yet because I've got this negative sign. So I need to get rid of that negative sign by dividing everything by a -1. So now that I've divided everything by -1, see if we can slide this up, I'm going to be left with a +x equals a -2. And this right here then is my final answer. Please let me know if you have any questions. Hopefully this kind of helped refresh a few things, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good afternoon.